Kia ora, bula, kia rana, talofa, manualele, and it's great to be here for another week with two Palangi and a PCNEC pod. My name's Glenn Murphy, and I'm based here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and you can see in my background that my renovation project is still ongoing and hasn't made a lot of progress in the week. But still very excited to be here with Dave and telling stories about Pacific business and the wonderful people who are doing that business.
And kamna bari ni Māori, talofa ni kia orana, bulavinaka. I'm Dave Dewar, based here in Rarotonga, Cook Islands, but previously based in Fiji. And I've been working with Glenn for the last 5 years. It's been a fantastic time to be telling the stories of New Zealand and Australian and Pacific businesses doing some incredible things across this region, and super excited to be doing that same job now through this weekly podcast.
And in this episode, we're going to have a fairly broad look at some of the key things that are happening in business across the Pacific. And we'll start with a little bit of a chat about last week's pod with Jenny Sito, where we've had some excellent feedback and commentary. And what a wonderful discussion that was. But hey, first, Dave, I'm recording here in New Zealand. It's Saturday. I know it's your Friday. And so you're still in Waitangi Day. I had a fantastic Waitangi Day yesterday and went to, on Waiheke Island, there is a marae called the Piratahi Marae. And what I had not known, and I found out yesterday, was it's what's known as a Torahiri Marae. And so it's one that's open to all iwi, and it's a very community-based marae. And I got to say, yesterday it was fantastic to go along. It's a beautiful space, lovely buildings, and the feel of the community with music playing. There were food stands, there were kid zones, there was a Pacifica food stand. If I hadn't just had breakfast, I would have gone for a plateful. But yeah, it was a great day. What about your Waitangi Day? How's that progressing?
Yes, well, it's the 6th of February today in Rarotonga as we're recording, but of course we celebrated Waitangi Day yesterday, the same time as New Zealand, and I was privileged to do so at Ngāti Pā, which is the residence of the New Zealand High Commissioner, Catherine Graham, and it was a fantastic event yesterday afternoon. It's a stunning venue. Many people who have been to Rarotonga on official business or just regular business may have been invited to an event there. It sits in the shadow of the Maunga Ikurangi, and it's named Ngāti Pā after the Pā Ariki, which is the local Ariki or iwi leader that gifted the land initially to the crown. And it was spectacular, just an amazing setting. We had some very interesting speeches and a lot of waiata and celebration, as you'd expect. A little bit of controversy as well, Glenn.
Yes, I'm not surprised.
Yeah. Well, it's been a big year in the Cook Island New Zealand relationship, but we won't delve into that. The real controversy that was mentioned, though, of course, was a hangover from the previous Australia Day event the week before, where, as you know, I played a bit of a role, and I was called out for that by the High Commissioner for my dual loyalties, as she expressed it. But the big controversy
at least she didn't refer to it as being a traitor. At least it was dual loyalties. That's very
the problem was that word was being bandied around later in the event by both sides. So I figured I was at least treading some sort of middle ground. But the controversy, of course, concerned the pavlova. So the Australian High Commissioner, who I know well, at the Australian event, of course, tried to claim the pavlova as the Australian dessert. And you can imagine the response from the New Zealand High Commissioner and her remarks yesterday. But yeah, a lot of questioning over what constitutes a proper pavlova, because this one had, I think, a bit of chocolate and blueberries on it.
Okay, so, you can always innovate with dessert, Dave. I mean, that's nothing wrong with that at all.
You can, but I think the controversy will persist beyond the event. So let's see how that goes. But a lot of other Waitangi Day events around the region as well. I was looking on the Facebook last night and saw some spectacular events at some of the New Zealand High Commissions around the Pacific. Particular shout out to Solomon Islands. The team in Honiara did a fantastic job there. I've been to the New Zealand High Commission in Honiara. It's a beautiful spot. They've got a stunning team shirt, the Kalavata shirt that they wear. But kudos to Jonathan Kerr, the new High Commissioner there, and all of the team. I saw that Prime Minister Manele gave some really good remarks and took an amazing video actually of the event. So you could check that out on Facebook if you haven't seen it.
Fantastic. Hey, so Dave, some great sort of community celebrations and work, but I know it's always the week's had a bit of a tinge of sadness for you as well. So I wonder if you just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah, it has, Glenn. And as we were talking about before the show, it has been a sad week for me personally, and also I know for the Fijian business community. I received a sort of a notification via social media, and I know many people will have seen it and probably shared my surprise and shock really at seeing that a gentleman by the name of Sanjesh Prasad had passed away. Sanjesh was the CEO of the Vision Group, and a very widely respected leader. To me, a friend. I hadn't actually realised that he was sick. He sort of passed away after a battle with an illness, and I know that many people across the Fijian business community attended his funeral on Monday this week. So really just wanted to acknowledge, I think, the impact that will have had on his family, the Vision Group itself, and especially it came after the untimely passing of another senior Vision leader, Nikunj Vagela, another friend of mine who died at the end of last year. So really just wanted to send our thoughts, our aroha, our lolomas to the Prasad family, as well as to the broader Vision Group.
Dave, and I guess the legacy will continue of the Vision Group. So while our thoughts and love are with the family and friends of Sanjesh, his legacy will move on. And so, can you tell us a little bit about the Vision Group and what that is?
I can, Glenn, and I know you and I have had the pleasure of sitting down, in fact, with Sanjesh and Anil and others at the Vision Group at a previous topics function in Fiji, and talking about the history and the uniqueness of that business in Fiji. And it's probably one that we can profile in a future episode, and I'd love to do that if anyone from Vision's listening. But really cool story. It's a story of amalgamation and partnership of a few very influential Fijian family businesses. So you're the R.C. Manubai family, the Patels, the family that run Jack's as well, Jack's of Fiji, and several others kind of coming together to initially buy the Courts department store when that was sold off by its initial English owners. But since then, that business has expanded into a whole range of other sectors. There's an automotive dealership, Vision Motors. There's a renewable energy business. There's a tourism business as well. They own the Hilton property in Denarau. And very widespread and influential business in Fiji. Yeah, lolomas to them, and as you say, I'm sure that legacy will continue in that business.
Yeah. Oh well, yeah, definitely. That's a powerhouse of business from what you've mentioned, what we know about it. So it'd be terrific to be able to profile that, and I guess through that pay respect for the legacy that has been created. And we'll move on, and let's tell Talanoa about the week that has been and some of the things that have caught our eyes. And I guess, first of all, just a comment on the wonderful interview and discussion in Talanoa we had last week with Jenny Sito. And we've had a lot of feedback and a lot of commentary through the week about that. And I guess it leads on to a little bit further commentary on tourism and some of the things that we've just picked up this week as well, after talking to Jenny about the Fiji Tourism Summit.
Yeah, absolutely, Glenn. I think we could tell, even as we were having that conversation, just what an incredible opportunity it was to hear from one of Fiji's most respected business leaders, and someone with a huge amount of history in that industry. And that's been reflected in some pretty awesome feedback that I've had personally. I'm sure you have had separately. A lot of people kind of messaging through our various channels, including our Gmail address, and just letting us know, how awesome they found that conversation. So once again, vinaka vakalevu to you, Jenny, for coming on the show, and I hope your family enjoyed listening. But a couple
Dave,
of other
sorry to stop you, but what is that Gmail address again?
Oh, let's say it again. So it's 2.palagi, Palagi, @gmail.com. So yeah, feel free to get in touch with any more feedback about this or other episodes that you've been listening to or watching on our new YouTube channel. Look forward to hearing plenty more feedback through that and other places where you know how to find us. But I mentioned, Glenn, talking about that impact of the tourism industry. And one of the things we asked Jenny was just how important it was for the economy. And I saw a couple of other figures mentioned this week that really reinforced that. One was the remarks by the Australian High Commissioner to Fiji, Peter Roberts, at the Australian High Commission's Australia Day event, where he mentioned that Fiji and Australia have a trade relationship worth $4.4 billion, or I think that equates to something like $6.5 billion Fijian, really, really significant two-way trade. But the key thing he mentioned was that actually Fiji has a surplus with Australia. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, because, I wondered what Fiji was sending to Australia, and many people probably wonder likewise, given that Australia sends so many goods and things like that into Fiji. But the answer is tourism, right? If you measure tourism as a service, as we really should do, because it's a major foreign exchange earner, and services trade in an economy like ours in New Zealand or Australia is kind of the number one largest sector of the economy. That's where Australians are buying more from Fiji than they're selling to it. They're buying those holiday experiences. So those travel services are a really significant part of that economy.
Yeah.
And it got me reflecting as well on the comparison with New Zealand, because that was obviously something that I'd spent a lot of time in my previous role focusing on. And, so Fiji does not have a trade surplus with New Zealand. New Zealand sends more to Fiji in terms of predominantly goods, machinery, food, you name it, than we buy in imports from Fiji. However, if you do count the tourism and travel services, then that gap between what we sell and what we buy narrows quite significantly. So I think New Zealand sends about $860 million worth of, that's New Zealand dollars worth of goods predominantly to Fiji, but we buy about $530 million worth of holiday packages, holiday experiences, and all of the spending that goes on in Fiji while Kiwi tourists are there. So that gap's quite narrow. But if you look across the region and you apply that same, in my view, correct interpretation of what trade flows are, then there's one country that actually has a surplus with New Zealand, and that's
what country is that?
Do you know what it is?
What country is that? Let's have a big reveal.
It's the country where I'm currently living, and that's Cook Islands. So it was interesting actually. Prime Minister Brown mentioned the trade relationship in his remarks at Waitangi Day yesterday, and New Zealand sends an awful lot to Cook Islands, so they import much from New Zealand, around about $240 million in terms of goods, predominantly to support keep the economy running, but also there's a surplus back because New Zealand imports $320 million in terms of those tourism services from Cook Islands, and that's the value of the holidays and money spent by tourists when they come here. So around about a $90 million surplus to Cook Islands from that trade relationship, which is fantastic, right? That's just shows, I think, the value as an exchange earner and as an economic driver from an international trade perspective.
The other little bit of news this week is with regard to Palau, and still on the tourism thing, but the growth of tourism in Palau that's happened as a result of Qantas flights. And I think the data went something like they used to have 53 from Australia a month. Now it's 300. And the president's certainly keen to continue that growth and is putting as much pressure as possible on Qantas to increase the number of flights that are going. So again, small numbers in some ways, but for a community and an economy of that size, something that'll make a real difference. It probably already is, but could go even further.
Yeah, huge impact, Glenn. I think that that's been a real game changer for the tourism industry in Palau. That establishment of regular flights out of Australia that started in late 2024, and initially and still, I think, supported by the Australian government to support Qantas to provide a regular weekly service up into Palau. But it's just gone gangbusters, right? I think there might have been maybe questions at the start about how viable it was and what the demand would be like. But as people have gone up to Palau and seen just the incredible beauty up there, and it is a stunning place, they're really seeing the value in that. We're going to be hearing a lot about Palau this year because, of course, they're hosting the Pacific Island Forum. Really showing, I think, just the value that Palau is attaching to growing those tourism numbers out of Australia, but the money and the investment that flows from that's really significant.
Yeah, well, I think that's right. And Jenny touched on it last week a little bit with regard to Fiji, but the impact on small business of, that money coming in and the small businesses that can grow up around that. And I think, one of them that Jenny mentioned was Rosie's in Fiji, which, has become a very impressive business.
It's been spectacular, and Rosie's is a fantastic business, and a huge shout out to Tony Whitten and the team over there. She also mentioned Te Waka, which is our friend James Sawane, again doing a fantastic job in sort of tourism bookings and also transport services around the country. Great example of two businesses that are enabled and driven by that continued growth in the tourism economy.
Hey, Dave, well, let's move on from tourism and have a little bit of a look at the banking sector. I know you were commenting when we were talking earlier about a little glitch that happened with regard to visa payments.
Basically, what happened was there's been big news in the Cook Islands that a whole lot of people who have been using visa payments, particularly with one of the banks, BSP, were double charged. So their visa bill kind of recorded what should have been one transaction was double that transaction. And I think that was caused by a glitch in the system. And basically with a bank, it has a relationship with Visa. It has to maintain its relationship with the businesses that use the Visa terminals, with Visa, the actual credit card operator, and to reconcile that payment through its own kind of internal banking system. And I think it was at that reconciliation part, which would have happened, I believe, in Papua New Guinea, which is where BSP Bank is headquartered and has most of its back office functions. So just showing you that kind of interconnection with the Pacific business here. But essentially with that double charging, that I think had been brought to everyone's attention by the fact that refunds for tourists hadn't been processed. And then, of course, in processing those refunds, duplicating the overall kind of system is what kind of triggered the glitch, I think, and led to payments coming out twice. Now, it's all been fixed. It's all been fixed, but I think it illustrates that point that Jenny mentioned last week as well about that importance of digitization, because increasingly, people aren't traveling with traveler's checks anymore, and just that integrity of the credit card system and increasing digital payments is really something that tourism industries do need to be very conscious of.
Yeah, so it does sound like sort of no lasting harm done, apart from perhaps a little bit of reputation, and probably a need to recheck processes and and for anybody who's been in the Cook Islands recently and using a Visa card, check that you've been refunded. Yeah. Hey, while I was sort of on the banking and finance angle, I noted the quarterly report from American Samoa has the economy going into negative inflation or deflation at only slightly, but minus 0.1%, I think, for the final quarter of last year. It did cause me to sort of think, gosh, lower prices as a consumer does sound like a good thing, but I reflected when I did Economics 101 back in university, I do remember vaguely that deflation was not actually a good thing for an economy. And so I just had to go back. I didn't go back and find my university notes, but I did do a little bit of research on it. And sure enough, deflation is not necessarily a good thing. The reason for that is that it can lead to consumers delaying spending, which in turn can lead to businesses stopping hiring and halting investment. It can lead to existing debt actually being harder to repay. And that has an impact both at an individual level, a business level, and at a government level in terms of any government debt that's being held. So it actually is quite a negative, or can be quite a negative. And then, of course, the other issue being that central banks find it very hard, that the tools that they typically use are very ineffectual in a deflationary cycle. And so the real problem can be if it becomes an ongoing cycle of deflation. I did have a look at, well, what's happening in American Samoa, and it looks like it's mainly in the food area. And particularly, they highlighted eggs, which have come down by 238% in the quarter. So hopefully for the American Samoan economy, what that means is it's a cyclical, seasonal kind of impact rather than anything that's really built in.
Funny you mention eggs. I went to our supermarket this morning to do my shop and hoped to pick some up, but couldn't because there were none on the shelves here. So hopefully, I did see the big Matson ship in the Avatu Harbour. So hopefully, there's a few more on that. But many actually come from Samoa. There's a pretty significant import into Cook Islands from Samoa. In terms of egg production there. I've actually been to the egg facility just out of up here. So I do wonder if that is also, some of those are going over to American Samoa, if that's having a price impact.
Cool. So look, Dave, in your notes, you had some stuff on the infrastructure occurrences. And I think, first of all, there are some dates being released for a big seminar in Nandi.
We might have teased in an earlier episode that later in May this year, there would be a reasonably large infrastructure-focused event taking place in Nandi, Fiji, organised by the Asian Development Bank and various other development partners. Now, the dates for that have just been published, so that'll be taking place from Monday, the 25th of May, through to Wednesday, the 27th of May in Nandi, Fiji. And this is the second time they've run it, is a bit more down in the nitty-gritty. So you get some great attendance from not only people at the actual procurement level of some of these government agencies from across the Pacific, but also, just the utilities, the state-owned enterprises, the other kind of parts of the infrastructure ecosystem in the region that are really the places where decisions get made.
So, Dave, if you were talking to Australia and New Zealand businesses, who do you think should go?
Yeah, look, I think anyone who is playing in that largely sovereign infrastructure space. So we're talking utilities, energy, water, transport. And that's kind of ports, airports, roads, heck of a lot of investment kind of going on as we know, across the region. For example, on Wednesday this week, another sort of advertorial to those listening. I know that the Asian Development Bank and the government of Vanuatu is hosting a webinar on a water supply tender that's going to be coming out on the island of Santo, a Bougainville water and sanitation project. I guess the other thing I'd really encourage would be to attend that if you're a business based in the Pacific, because one of the biggest trends in this part of the world is to want to see more local businesses winning this work, participating in the work and partnering in on it. And I know from talking to New Zealand and Australian businesses, they are very, very keen to identify capable local partners that they can, deliver some of this work with. And places like Nandi, events like this are a great place to build those partnerships and connections.
Hey, one other thing I picked up was the signing of an MOU between Tonga and Australia around the energy transition and renewables space. And I note in there that the Australian government's already putting 125 million Australian dollars into this energy transition. So what's your thinking on opportunities in that area for Australia and New Zealand businesses?
Well, I think there was a dollar figure attached to it. Tonga is an interesting market when it comes to energy. They've done some great work in encouraging private investment, independent power producers. There's a number of businesses from New Zealand, Australia, and actually around the region that have done some great work delivering renewable energy in Tonga. In collaboration with Tonga Power. There's a big announcement, there's that kind of signaling of political will, then the actual kind of mechanics of the money gets separately negotiated, whether it's loan or grant financing. And then it actually has to go into the system with the government of Tonga and Tonga Power in this case, which would be the procurer, I suppose, of any energy investment, whether that's a sovereign EPC type contract that you're building a new plant, or generation facility for them to then manage, or if it's a more complex kind of independent power production plan paid for by the government over a period of time.
Hey, anything else in the infrastructure space, Dave, that you want to comment on this week?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, gosh, where do we start, Glenn? I mean, it's I mentioned, Vanuatu. It's a water and sanitation project that the ADB will be inviting people to a market information webinar this week.
I wonder if Wellington might want to talk to ADB about water sanitation projects this week as well.
Well, my old hometown is very much aware of some of the challenges with pressures on water infrastructure, but also just how important it is, right? It's important for water's an absolutely critical thing to get it cleanly and to get it effectively to your house or your property, but also wastewater, and it's one of those kind of probably the least sexy of all of the infrastructure sectors, in some cases, in my view, the most important. It shows you that these are challenges that aren't unique to the Pacific. They're ones that, in economies like New Zealand or Australia, that often have much larger economies and resources still grapple with and need to invest in. And I think that also is useful expertise that New Zealand businesses or Australian and others can bring to some of those operating contexts in the Pacific. It's not like they're coming in from a perfect environment back home. They know about the challenges, and they often know how to work on the ground collaboratively to fix them. So that's one thing. I think the other thing I mentioned was there's been a lot of interest, I think, in the development of Lambasa Airport up in Vanuatu, and that's part of a very large investment in, once again, improving tourism-related infrastructure to get, again, some of those great tourism numbers up to the northern part of Fiji. Lambasa's a beautiful spot. Savu up in Vanuatu as well, incredible spot. A lot of interest in the extension and development of that Lambasa airport. There's a bit of a delay that's crept in, I think, that I saw was about discussions over land use and land rights. Once again, as Jenny mentioned last week, super important to get right, that benefit sharing. Fiji's got a very good system, I think, for that. It takes time, and that's something that I know a lot of people in the business community will be watching very closely. And then we mentioned the mine. So gosh, we could spend months talking about mining across the Pacific, and maybe we will. But
so is a copper mine in Bougainville, is that right?
Indeed it is. So a famous or infamous mine whose closure a couple of decades ago was one of the factors that played into the quite terrible civil war and conflict that played out in Bougainville, which New Zealand will be very familiar with. Played a very, New Zealand Defence Force and Australia played a very significant role in that conflict. And so that resource has always been a bit of a lightning rod for tension. It's also a very significant economic resource as well for Bougainville, where the viability of the Panguna mine resource is a key part and plays into that debate. Two factors, worth being aware of. One is that the president of Bougainville has been talking about the imminence of the mine's reopening. I think he's mentioned June 2020, but also I don't think that they have identified an operating partner just yet. So there's been a bit of media about two prospective operating partners, one out of China and one out of India. And I think that the negotiations with the prospective Chinese operator have finished, and that's not going to be proceeded with. But there's a live discussion with, I believe the business is called Lloyd's out of India.
Hey, Dave, we've covered tourism, banking, infrastructure, and mining in this episode. So that leaves us with only one thing to talk about, and that is, of course, Kava.
Well, Fiji in particular, but not just Fiji, Vanuatu, Tonga, also very big Kava producers and consumers. But the numbers that I saw were once again out of Fiji, which was talking about the growth in that industry. So the number that I saw was that it's grown to now 190 million Fijian dollars worth. So that's incredible. but also a lot of
Yeah.
that's driven by export. And I think the other point that I'd seen in the same article was that it has now officially overtaken all of the other agricultural exports out of Fiji in terms of its overall values. And one of the people that I think would really like to talk to is a gentleman by the name of Zane Yoshida, who's the CEO of the Karma Collective, the Karma Group.
Right.
So
we can have a Kava with them.
I hope so. Well, he's suggested that, and I think it's an offer that we should take up. So for those of us that are watching online, stay tuned for that. We'll have a virtual Kava session, and really looking forward to a talanoa with Zane in the coming weeks. It's listed on the ASX. So CCO, I think, is the ticker number.
Well, it's been great note to finish on. Look forward to having a virtual Kava. And Dave, been great to talanoa with you for another week about Pacific business. And I'll hand over to you to close us out.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn. And thanks to everyone for listening and for all of your feedback and messages. For those of you who are just coming to know the pod, please subscribe. Please check us out on some of those channels. Tell your friends and keep sending through that feedback and ideas for people or businesses or trends that you'd like us to cover. This has been Tūpalangi in a Pisinesi pod for the week ending, my 6th of February, everyone else's 7th of February.